Assalamu alaikum dear students. Today we are going to study another very important topic from sensory physiology. We have already studied receptors. We will study two important somatosensory pathways or ascending pathways, which are dorsal column pathway and spinothalamic pathways. These pathways are ascending pathways, which means they ascend through the spinal cord to take the information from the environment to our cerebral cortex. So just to give you an idea why we call this pathway a dorsal column pathway, let's quickly revise the cross section of spinal cord. You already know that the cut section of spinal cord is oval in structure, which has white matter on the surface and gray matter deeper to that. This is opposite to the arrangement of gray and white matter in the cerebrum and cerebellum, where gray matter is located on the surface and white matter is present deeply. The gray matter in spinal cord is butterfly shaped, which is organized into anterior, lateral, and posterior horns. The white matter in spinal cord is organized into three columns, which are anterior white column or ventral white column, the lateral white column, and posterior white column. And keep in mind, these columns are horns that are present on both sides. The posterior white column is also called as dorsal column. So this dorsal column pathway, when it is passing through the spinal cord, it goes through the posterior white column or the dorsal white column of the spinal cord. So in this dorsal column pathway, let's begin with the receptors. The receptors in this case are the ends of the nerve fibers, and here the first order neurons are either A alpha or A beta nerve fibers, which belong to sensory type 1 and type 2 nerve fibers. So their ends behave as receptors, or they are associated with some specialized receptors. Just to mention the names of some important receptors which are present in this pathway: Pacinian corpuscle, Meissner's corpuscle, Ruffini's end organs, Merkel's disc, Golgi tendon organs, muscle spindles. So these are some common examples of receptors which are present in the dorsal column pathway. And the sensations which are carried here in the dorsal column pathway are those sensations which are very finely localized, or they require perception of fine grades of intensity. For example, fine touch and fine pressure. So the slight change in the touch or pressure can be detected by the receptors present in this pathway. Similarly, vibrations which are detected by the Meissner's and Pacinian corpuscles. Proprioception or the sense of position. Some important proprioceptors are Golgi tendon organs, muscle spindles, Pacinian corpuscle, and also the Ruffini's endings. Stereognosis is the ability to recognize an object with the closed eyes. For example, this is a whiteboard marker. Graphesthesia is when your eyes are closed and someone writes on your body like 1 or 2, you recognize it is correctly. Two-point tactile discrimination is the ability to recognize 2 points as 2 when they are very closely placed, very well developed in our fingertips. It's mainly because of Meissner's corpuscles. And also the movement across our skin, which is detected by the hair follicle receptors. So this kind of sensations and the receptors associated are present in this pathway. The first order neurons, they belong to A alpha or A beta category of nerve fibers, and the velocity of conduction in this system between 30 to 120 meters per second. So faster velocity of conduction in this pathway as compared to spinothalamic pathway. The peripheral axon of these first order neurons is associated with the receptor, and the central axon of these first order neurons, it enters into the spinal cord. The cell body is located in the dorsal root ganglia. The central axon of these first order neurons, when it enters into the spinal cord here at the dorsal gray horn, it divides into two branches. One is the lateral branch and the other one is medial branch. First order neurons enters into the spinal cord and it divides into two branches, the lateral one and the medial one. The lateral branch, it provides signals in response to which some local reflexes are initiated, and the medial branch, it travels upward in the dorsal column. The signals from lower part of the body ascends upward medially and the signals from the upper part of body ascend upward laterally. For example, the signals which are from leg, they are accumulated on the medial side of this dorsal column pathway, and the signals from our upper limb, they are accumulated laterally in the dorsal column pathway. So in the upper parts of spinal cord we can see two columns. One is the on medial side, one is on medial side and the other one is present on lateral side. The medial column is also called as fasciculus gracilis, which is having signals coming from lower parts of the body, and the lateral column is also called as fasciculus cuneatus, which is having signals from upper part of the body. Here the word fasciculus means a bigger tract. So dorsal column in the upper part of spinal cord divides into two tracts, fasciculus gracilis medially and the fasciculus cuneatus laterally, having signals from lower part of the body and from upper part of the body respectively. These signals in the dorsal column pathway ascend upward ipsilaterally, which means on the same side, and they enter into the medulla oblongata. In the dorsal part of medulla, at upper part, these nerve fibers, they synapse with the two nuclei in the medulla which are called as dorsal column nuclei. These dorsal column nuclei are nucleus gracilis medially, which synapses with the nerve fibers in the fasciculus gracilis, and nucleus cuneatus, which is present laterally, and it synapses with the nerve fibers present in the fasciculus cuneatus. So after this relay in the medulla, second order neurons they start, which cross towards opposite side, and this crossing from left side is towards right and from right is towards left. So this crossing is like this, and this kind of crossing, this is called as sensory decussation or sensory crossing. Sensory decussation or sensory crossing, which is present in the upper part of medulla, and the motor decussation, which is seen in the corticospinal tract, that is present in the lower part of medulla, which means the motor nerve fibers in the corticospinal tract also cross from one side to the other side, but in the lower part of medulla. So as soon as these fibers in the upper part of medulla cross towards opposite side, they form a tract which is called as medial lemniscus. This medial lemniscus ascends upwards in the brainstem, that is in the medulla, pons and midbrain. This is also joined by fibers which carry similar somatosensory sensations coming from the face region, and these are the nerve fibers which are coming along the trigeminal nerve. And these signals then find another relay nucleus in the thalamus. The third order neurons start from the thalamus, and these third order neurons in the thalamus, they are called as ventrobasal complex. It contains two nuclei. One is the ventral posteromedial and the other one is ventral posterolateral. Ventral posterolateral nucleus, it contains somatosensory signals which are coming from whole of the body except face, and the signals coming along the spinothalamic pathway and the dorsal column pathway, they synapse here at the ventral posterolateral nucleus in thalamus. In the ventral posteromedial nucleus, the signals which are coming along the trigeminal nerve synapse here. Another important point to notice here is the topographical orientation of these nerve fibers. You see here in the dorsal column, the signals which were coming from the lower parts of body, they were medially located, and the signals which are coming from the upper part of the body, they were laterally located. But after crossing over here at the level of medulla, the signals which are coming from the lower part of body, they are laterally located, and signals from upper part of the body are medially located. Topographical organization of signals can also be seen at the level of thalamus, where the signals from face and upper parts of the body are medially located, and the signals from lower parts of the body are laterally located. We must know the clinical importance of this crossing over. If there is damage to this dorsal column tract before crossing over, that is in the spinal cord, then the signals will be lost on the same side of body. For example, if this dorsal column tract is cut on the right side, these sensations which are carried by this pathway will be lost on the right side of body. But after crossing over, if there is a cut to this pathway, either in brainstem or at higher level, the loss of signals will be on the opposite side of body. So if after crossing over the signals they are cut in the left side, the loss of sensation will be on the right side of body. These third order neurons, which are starting from ventrobasal complex of thalamus, ascend upward to find another relay in the primary sensory cortex or S1, which is present in the post central gyrus. Just to give you an idea where this primary sensory cortex is located, which contains fourth order neurons, here is a simple diagram which shows the lateral surface of our brain. You can see here our brain can be divided into four lobes: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. The primary sensory cortex is present in the parietal lobe of our cerebrum, just posterior to the sulcus, which is called as central sulcus. Brodmann was a scientist who has given a number to this primary sensory cortex. The area number here is 312. In this primary sensory cortex, the signals, they are topographically organized and the body is represented upside down, which means that the signals of upper parts of the body, the face, they are downwards. The signals from the arm, trunk, they're upwards, then our legs, and then on the medial side are the signals which are coming from feet. Another important feature of this primary sensory cortex is that various body parts are represented here according to their receptor density, which means that those parts which have more receptor density and more nerve fibers carrying signal from those parts, they have a bigger representation here. For example, the face and hands, they are the ones which have maximum representation, and in face our lips, and in our hands the thumb especially, they have a big representation here in the primary sensory cortex. Here this is the cross section through this primary sensory cortex, and you can see here the face is represented on the lateral side, then is our arms, trunk, and then his legs, and then feet are on the medial surface. So the biggest representation in the primary sensory cortex is for our lips, for face, and then is for our hands, and in our hands especially for our thumb. When we draw a diagram showing the representation of each part of the body in the primary sensory cortex, the proportional area wise representation here in the primary sensory cortex gives you a cartoon like structure which is called as sensory homunculus. This is a cartoon like structure which is drawn here in the primary sensory cortex, and that shows the topographical or somatotopic organization of different parts of body in the primary sensory cortex. Please keep in mind that the primary sensory cortex gets signals from the contralateral side of the body, which means from the right side signals go to the left somatosensory cortex, and from the left side signals go to the right somatosensory cortex. Now let's summarize some important points about the dorsal column pathway. The receptors here in the dorsal column pathway, they are more sophisticated, well developed structures like Meissner's corpuscle, Pacinian corpuscles, and the nerve fibers which are first order neurons. They belong to A alpha and A beta category of nerve fibers, and among sensory classification these fibers are of type 1 and type 2 categories. First order neurons, they ascend ipsilaterally, which means without crossing over in the spinal cord, and these fibers are located in the two tracts. One is the fasciculus gracilis medially, and that takes signals from the lower part of body, fasciculus cuneatus, which is laterally, and that takes signal from the upper part of the body. These tracts, they find the relay nuclei in the upper part of medulla dorsally. These nuclei are called as dorsal column nuclei, nucleus gracilis medially, and nucleus cuneatus laterally. The axons of these nuclei, they cross towards opposite side to form sensory decussation. The fibers from left side cross to the right side, and from right to the left side. Keep in mind the sensor decussation is located in the upper part of medulla, and motor decussation is located in the lower part of medulla. After this crossing over, this tract of nerve fibers is called as medial lemniscus, which is also joined by the signals coming along trigeminal nerve or cranial nerve number 5, and that carries the same somatosensory signals which are carried by the dorsal column pathway. These second order neurons, they relay in the thalamus in the ventrobasal complex, which has two nuclei. ventral posterolateral, that synapses with the signals coming from lower limbs and upper limbs and from trunk, and ventral medial nucleus, which synapses with the signals coming along trigeminal nerve. And then the third order neuron starting from the thalamus, they synapse in the primary sensory cortex or somatosensory cortex, which is present just posterior to the central sulcus. According to Brodmann, this has the number area 312. Fourth order neurons are located in the primary sensory cortex. In the dorsal column pathway, those sensations are carried which are carried at a faster speed between 30 to 120 meters per second, which are better localized and for which the fine changes in the intensity can be detected. The sensations carried in this pathway are fine touch, fine pressure, vibration, the sense of position of proprioception, stereognosis, graphesthesia, two-point tactile discrimination, and throughout this pathway, there is a somatotopic organization of the information. In the spinal cord, the signals from lower part of the body they are medially located, and from upper part of the body are laterally located. After this crossing in the medulla, the signals in the medial lemniscus from lower parts of the body are located laterally, and from upper parts of the body are located medially. And in the thalamus as well, the signals from upper part of the body and from face they are medially located, and the signals from lower part of the body they are laterally located. In the primary sensory cortex, body is represented upside down and the face is represented most laterally and downwards. Then is our arms, trunk, legs, and the feet are represented on the medial surface of the cerebral cortex. When we draw a diagram which gives area-wise representation to various body parts in the primary sensory cortex, the structure is called as sensory homunculus. Similarly, we also have a motor homunculus. In this sensory homunculus, the biggest representation is for our face, especially our lips, and for hands, especially for our thumb, and the other parts of body they have a smaller representation. You can see here, if this is the cross section through this primary sensory cortex, our face is represented laterally, then our arms, trunk, then upward is our legs, and then medially will be our feet. So this is all about the important features of dorsal column pathway. In the next session, we will study another important ascending pathway, which is also somatosensory, and that is spinothalamic pathway. There are two types of spinothalamic pathway, the anterior and lateral one, and they are collectively called as anterolateral system. We will compare the receptors, the nerve fibers, the crossing over, the sensations carried, and the final destination for spinothalamic pathway. It's very important to study the comparison between the features of dorsal column pathway and spinothalamic pathway, which we'll study in our next session. Thank you so much for watching this video. See you next time with another video.